Hey YouTube, how's everyone doing on this fine first day of June 2019? I'm starting a little early today. Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. Can I get an audio check just to make sure? Video check. Um, I'm starting a little early today. Thank you, Laura. It it's getting harder and harder to avoid Mark Shrimp Tanks doing his live stream. He's basically decided on this time slot. I guess it's good for him. I guess it's 9 o'clock in the evening for him, so it's good for him too. So I'm ever inching ever earlier, trying to avoid stepping on his toes as much as possible. Hey, Lumpy Dog, welcome to the stream. Um, I've I'm I've been casting about, trying to come up with a topic. You know, that's the thing about doing these live streams and doing videos on YouTube. After a while, it gets really hard to come up with new, novel uh, things that haven't been done hundreds and hundreds of times. Um, it all starts sounding like the same thing after a while, and I know I'm probably bad about repeating myself. And hey, Oddball Aquatics, welcome to the stream. How are the rope fish doing at this fine date? Um, I thought about spending some time in Blair's biotypes to look up um, rope fish and see what they had to say on there, but I think I remember already looking and that they didn't say much. At some point, I will try to dig a little deeper on the rope fish topic and see if I can come up with any more information for you. I really recommend doing it on your own because it will be much more valuable to you when you have done the groundwork itself. Haley says they're doing well. I'm filling out paperwork for next week's meetings. I'm going to inspire Lucas to participate in HAP and BAP by beating his score. Ah, that'll get him. Hey, Cody's son, welcome to the stream. Um, One of the topics I'm kind of watching and glomming off a lot of the stuff that Haley Oddball Aquatics here is doing. Haley, I guess I ought to give you the wrench. Since you gave me the wrench in your live stream. Hey, CJ Cichlids, welcome to the stream. Lumpy Dog says, how about natural community breeding? Lower fry yield, but fun and easy. Nothing like surprise fry in the tank. Yeah, um, uh, natural community breeding is kind of, you know, when we talk about breeding uh, fish, um, sometimes you work really hard to get fish to breed, and sometimes you just throw fish together nonchalantly and they breed on their own. I mean, nature is going to find a way, if it can, for fish to breed. So if you've got a male and a female of a specific um, species, or even close species, um, then oftentimes those fish will set up breeding on their own, and you may not even recognize that that's going on because of all the activity in a community tank. Um, I, as I've progressed in my hobby over the years, I've gone away from the idea of a community tank. I, I pretty much just do um, biotopes or biotopes with a a few oddballs thrown in there. If I'm trying to like a rainbow fish tank with autosynclus in it. If I'm trying to clean up algae or diatomaceous algae in a tank. Hey Pam, welcome to the stream. 54 Punchy, AVB 23. Um, I, breeding in a community situation is fraught with problems because there's usually other fish in the tank that may or may not be predatory, but any fish will eat any other fish if it will fit in their mouth, almost without exception. I mean, there are some exceptions, but so yeah, I like community tanks, but I've kind of gone away from it. Um, Haley's asking me about splash tetras, and we caught splash tetras in Peru when we were down there, and we all kind of went with a certain idea of what kind of fish we wanted to keep. Now, Joseph didn't really seem to want to keep fish, so when we were collecting, he didn't really say, "Ooh, I want those." Uh, and Corey, as I've told you before, didn't really seem to want to personally keep fish because he felt like it would be a conflict with his store. Like he's keeping fish for his store to sell. And I think I understand why he felt that way. But if I was him, I would have kept as many as I could. Um, I mean, basically, what he was doing was deferring to Dean, hoping that Dean would breed them and Dean would sell them to the store. It's my understanding, anyway. Um, Splash tetras can be kind of difficult to keep. That's my take on it. Now, other people might tell you different things. They have some requirements that are a little above and beyond your normal tetra requirements. They seem to be, in my reading and my experience, they seem to be pretty sensitive to water condition changes, variances in temperature, variances in water quality. All of those things seem to affect splash tetras. And this is from my memory and from my reading. I was the one that said, I want all the tetras. I went down there with the idea that I wanted to catch all the lower card catfish that I could, and that's basically what I wanted to keep. Maybe a wolffish, maybe cichlids if we could find them. And when we started catching so many tetras, and I started looking at those tetras, I wanted to keep them. I wanted to keep the tetras, and so like the second day, I said, you know, I didn't really want them to begin with, but now I want to set up my 55-gallon with about 150 tetras in it. So I want to keep all the tetras. So we started keeping hatchet fish, the monk tetras, all the tetras that we were collecting. We started keeping all of them because I wanted to keep them. And I think eventually Dean got to the point where he liked those monk tetras enough that he decided he wanted to keep those. So we were keeping lots of tetras, and if you go through the videos and the pictures, Haley, from the Peru trip, and some of the video may be cleaner on Corey or Joseph's side, you will see that there is a tank that has some splash tetras in it, which we caught, but they did not survive. As soon as the water quality went south, they died. So I didn't get to keep my splash tetras. And yeah, I would guess that 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 Regina and Eric brought back splash tetras when they came back. So yeah, they had better luck on their shipping. Okay, let's see if I can catch up with chat here. Pam says I like single species tanks, but if you're careful, you can keep and breed fish in a tank with several species, and that's very much true. VB23 says I'm trying to breed my tiger endlers to trade for rice fish locally. My experience with tiger endlers is they breed like crazy. In the rimless tank that I got from Jimmy, I am keeping Lucas's strain of tiger endlers, although it's so many years removed from Lucas's strain that it's turning into a strain of its own. I'm getting an awful lot of white in them now. They still carry the rainbow endler trait, but I'm getting a lot of white. I also noticed that my females, I'm starting to get some crooked spines in my females, which I don't like very much, but um, I'm down to so few of them. You know, it's kind of hard to tell when they're fry which ones are going to be the ones that are going to be keepable and which aren't. So you kind of got to let them grow up before you start trying to cull. So I'm keeping all of them just in case, but I am going to have to get rid of those ones with spinal deformities in them at some point here. Hey, Select Pets, welcome to the stream. And somebody's talking about rice fish. I guess Pam's got rice fish. Lumpy Dog says he's pretty sure that Bob Kaler has bred splash tetras in a tub. Yeah, that would probably work. Project is the trifecta tank, 20 long breeding cories, guppies, and plecos. I've got it, but you have to pull the cory and pleco eggs. Wish I could do it without pulling, but eggs are tasty. Yes, every fish is going to eat eggs. You could just as well figure that's going to happen. Yes. Haley asks, when you caught them in the wild, Dwayne, were they in slow moving water? Yeah, Select Pets. It is my strain now. It's been long enough. Haley, it is my recollection that they mostly stayed in the slower moving pools and in some of the deeper water pools alongside these creeks and rivers that we were in. And so, yes, I would say that they do stay in slower moving water, or that's where we caught them at. And I mean, that's understandable because it's really hard out in a heavy flow to actually try to catch a fish with a rocky, gravelly bottom and a heavy flow of, you know, maybe 10, 15 inches of heavy flow water. You can't really see the fish to net them. You're just basically stabbing the net in the water and guessing, hoping something gets swept in. Now, when we collected lure cards, the plecos, what we did was we stuffed our net into the bottom. We got a place where there was a stack of rocks on both sides, and then we would, that caused a V in the water flow, so that all the water was channeling through a small area. Lumpy Dog's got pea-sized hail coming down, and it's black outside. Lumpy Dog, be careful if it gets real quiet. If it gets real quiet, go and open a window on the opposite side of the house that the weather front is coming from, so that if you get a tornado, that you can let your house equalize its pressure without exploding. Because really black, green looking sky and hail are usually indicators of a heavy weather front that can very easily drop a tornado on you. And if it does drop a tornado on you, it's going to get really quiet before it shows up. And if it gets really quiet all of a sudden, go open some windows on the back side of the house away from the weather front, so that when the low pressure of a tornado gets close to you, that it will allow the house to equalize the pressure without exploding. Lumpy Dog says, I got frustrated with my boring, timid killifish, so I dropped in a few adult male guppies. Those guppies chase the killifish, all of the other tank trying to breed. The killifish are not boring now. And Haley says, you want to see some weird killifish behavior? The mascara barb tank in Lucas's garage has a golden wonder killie who is the tank boss. The hill trouts work for him. He's a mobster and he bites me. Lumpy Dog, you be careful, man. Bad weather fronts are nothing to mess with. And Haley says, if you hear a train where you shouldn't during a storm after a quiet spell, that's textbook tornado. I've been through a few. And kiss your ass goodbye, says Pam. And yep, that's pretty much the story. I've ridden through many a tornado. I've got all kinds of ancillary tornado research and things that you can do in a tornado, and one of them is bend down and kiss your butt goodbye, because it could very well happen. But here's knocking on wood for you not to have a tornado. One of the things that I had kind of thought about talking about today, like I said, I was casting around for a topic, and by watching other people's videos, I get ideas sometimes for things to talk about. And one of the things that I've kind of been considering here lately is the difference between our little closed aquariums and nature, what fish find in the wild. And there are some huge differences. There are some pluses and minuses on both sides of the equation. In the wild, fish are getting massively more water change than they do in our fish tanks. If you follow people like Jack Watley or Dupote Mel, those guys would do 70 and 80% water changes a day in gigantic tanks. I'm not talking a 10, 20 gallon tank. I'm talking 5, 6, 800 gallons. They would change 70% of the water every day. And the reason why they're doing that is because that's basically what's going on in the wild. Those fish are getting brand new water every second of their entire lives in the wild. Now, what are the differences? What differences are there between what we find in the wild and what we have in our aquaria? Well, one of the differences is the water volume, the sheer water volume change that occurs in the wild as compared to what occurs in our little boxes of nature that we keep called aquariums. And Haley says, I've done 100,000% water changes at Lucas's. As long as the tank is well balanced or super dirty, it does nothing bad, and the plants and the fish love it. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that will tell you that, we all talk about doing 20% water change every 2 weeks or 30% a week or whatever whatever we've decided on, but that's nothing like what's going on in the wild. So one of the things that fish are getting in the wild is massive water quality changes. Their water basically renews itself 20 or 30 times a day. They don't get one water change a day. They get 40 water changes a day, and it's 100% water change. So another difference that's going on in the wild is that these fish have a massively larger area to spread out into. Because even if it's a little creek or a stream, there's thousands of times more room for those fish to move around in the wild. They can escape from predators. They can avoid being bullied. They can basically get away from anything in the wild because they have so much more room where they can get around. So when we are keeping our fish in this unnatural little glass box, which we so lovingly call aquaria, the amount of space that these fish have to get away from aggression, to avoid predatory behavior of other fish, to scatter their eggs and have them not immediately eaten. They have a much larger area to exist in. And in the case of like Haley and her ropefish, which come from highly stagnant waters that are basically reed ponds, even in something like that, where we perceive the water to be stagnant, there is a huge amount of water exchange that's going on. It's just not a very heavy flow. But if you take 10,000 gallons and move it very slowly, you're going to have a huge water exchange, even in something that we consider as stagnant water. It's not a high flow, it's not a raging torrent, but there is still movement in that water, and that movement is bringing in water from elsewhere that is cleaner. So in the wild, basically the water cleans itself. It's replaced so much by rain, by flows from higher elevations, by natural water courses. Yeah, and Haley says the stagnant water where they come from is still clear, which means it's not stagnant, and that's true. I mean, you can have water that's in motion that can be green, but So what I'm trying to get at here is that even though we may think that we are doing a good job of keeping our fish healthy, that we are doing enough water changes, um, the truth is in the wild they get hugely more water changes. And what they say in Kentucky, muchly more water changes. That's poor grammar in my thinking, but in this case, it kind of describes it. Um, so there are other different qualities. We've talked about the area difference. We've talked about the huge volume of water difference and the uh, renewal of the water continuously all day long, all night long. Um, there are also um, there are also huge amounts of evaporation that are occurring in natural bodies of water. There's also the effect of real sunlight on the water itself, which creates a very high activity in the molecules of the water. The more you heat water, the more you apply direct sunlight to the surface and the, the volume of water, the faster the molecules that make up water move or vibrate, and in doing so, they begin to evaporate more quickly. They give off their mineral content more quickly. They do a lot of things more quickly. And Lumpy Dog brings up a great point. In the natural environment, there's all kinds of microorganisms and algae and natural food that's just occurring in the bodies of water for fish to eat. So what they eat in their native environment is readily available to them in large quantities. Now, all these things vary too. I mean, there's some negative effects of living in the wild as opposed to a fish tank as well. And one of them is also the vast amounts of microorganisms and algae. What can happen is very negative parasitic blooms can occur in these natural environments that can happen quite easily and infect large areas, and in fact are probably there all the time. So there are downsides to the difference between our little boxes and nature, and one of them is the maladies that can affect fish in the wild. Of course, in the wild, fish have all these other benefits that are going on, which help their bodies defend against a lot of these infestations and yeah, I told you, Haley, I spent a little time looking up bugs in that area, and it's kind of a mixed bag what you can find out there. There is some information, but it's not that great. I didn't find it immediately helpful at all. Okay, so on the converse side, while our little aquarium boxes don't have 70, 100% water changes a day, and they don't have all of the natural microorganisms that fish want to eat, and they don't have huge areas for the fish to inhabit and scatter and lay their eggs or scatter their eggs, and they also don't get exposed to the same kind of natural diseases that, or at least the amount of natural diseases that they're going to be exposed to in the wild. Now, like I said, a lot of that's offset by how healthy a lot of the fish are in the wild, being able to fend off diseases and infections. But at least in our aquariums, we are the problem when it comes to what kind of infectious diseases or maladies that our fish are exposed to. So we can do a really good job of not adding fish that haven't been quarantined by being careful not to transfer problems from one tank to another by nets or water change equipment or whatever equipment we put in one tank and then turn around and put in another tank. If we are good at our quarantining, if we are good at our sterilization of equipment, then we can avoid transferring maladies to those fish in our little unnatural aquarium. Now, by the same token, by our treatment of water quality and water parameters, we may expose our fish to maladies that they've never been exposed to in the wild at all, or in their, if they're tank raised, not wild raised, that they were never exposed to before, because there is a large difference between the maladies that are present in highly acidic, low pH, low TDS water, and the maladies that are present in high pH, heavy TDS water. Different kinds of pathogens and bacteria can survive in those two different environments. And so if you take a fish that has been raised in soft water all of its life and then suddenly plunk it down into hard water, it's going to be exposed to a whole new group of pathogens and maladies that it's never been exposed to before. And we, as aquarists, are quite capable, from our lax maintenance, of turning soft water into hard water if we are simply topping off our tank every week and not changing the water out. If we are adding stuff like overfeeding, minerals to grow plants, fertilizers. If we are adding all this kind of stuff into the tank, we may unknowingly take acidic water and turn it into hard water. And that will create a change in the water parameter and a change in the types of pathogens that our fish are exposed to. And this really comes to the forefront when you're dealing with things like angelfish from the wild that are used to a pH of 4, highly acidic water, and then shipping them to the United States and putting them in well water with a pH of 8 and a TDS of 300, and all of a sudden those fish don't do well because they are facing maladies that they have never in their lifetime built up any kind of immunity to. And that's the upside and downside of our little boxes that we call aquaria that are us trying to keep nature in an unnatural setting. And it's quite possible to do it. It's quite possible to excel at doing it. But we need to be aware of the things that we need to do as aquarists that ameliorate the problems that come from a smaller volume of water, um, a closed system that's not exposed to uh, like the food sources in nature and the problems with aggression or breeding that occur in a smaller area. We need to, as aquarists, understand that we have to take actions to step in for nature if we hope to keep our fish in a thriving condition, because they don't have 40,000 gallons of water to swim around in. You know, unless you're big rich and have a gigantic swimming pool in which a really natural environment can occur, it's harder to get that kind of yeah, and Lumpy Dog brings up a good point that in the wild there is natural predation going on that will cull out the fish with bent spines because they can't swim fast enough, or the fish that are unhealthy. They're going to be slower or unnatural in their swimming, and predators will jump on that in a heartbeat and cull them out so that only the fittest survive in nature. And Haley says, I think that's why fish keepers love summer tubbing, because we get so much closer to actually keeping nature naturally. And I would fully agree with that. I did a little research today on the effect of sunlight on water, natural sunlight on water, and there's really some remarkable effects that are going on just because the natural sunlight is hitting water. It, it, it wasn't simple enough for me to condense it in a, you know, quick format for use in a live stream like this. I couldn't grasp what I was actually studying well enough, but I would highly recommend looking that up. What exactly goes on when a natural body of water is exposed to sunlight? There's some really momentous chemical and structural changes to the water that's affected by Haley says my tubs have gone green and I haven't been able to beat it yet. I blame Lucas. I never had green water before working for him. Lucas Lucas seems to be a natural with green water. But while we as aquarists don't like green water because it makes it harder for us to see what's going on in a tank, our fish love it. Fish love green water because they're immediately comfortable. They can see well enough in it to do what they need to do. And there is a huge source of food all around them. If they drop fry or scatter eggs in green water, those babies will not have to move a centimeter to eat as much as they want because the food will be naturally all around them. So Green water is a curse, but it's also a blessing too. And Haley, I would recommend, if you do get lucky enough to get some baby rope fish, that when it comes time to start feeding them, that you go out with a turkey baster and get you a turkey baster full of green water and squirt it right in on top of those little babies. Now you may add some infectious element that they didn't have to deal with before because you're bringing in water from outside. Um, Haley said he also had no clue he bred Emperor Tetras until I cleaned up the green water. Yeah, that's the way it goes because they love that green water. They're hidden, they feel safe, and they know that in green water that they are going to be able to um, have their fry do well. We found lots of green water in the wild in Peru. There were lots of places where the water moved slow enough for there to be really green water. Now a lot of it was brown from natural dirt and mud being stirred up, but it was also very green. You would find a place where there was a deep pool between two trees where a solid beam of sunlight was hitting one pool of water all the time, where it never missed. Haley says, I never thought of feeding the ropes green water because they are predators and meat eaters. So I'll need to think about that. Haley, you need to take a microscope, and Lucas has one, and look at what is actually in green water. Because you're going to find a great many meat creatures in green water feeding off of the algae. Paramecium, all of the kinds of things that a baby ropefish would love to nosh on are in green water. Hey, Aquaballs, welcome to the stream. All right, well, I just kind of wanted to broach that topic of us as fish keepers really sitting down and thinking about the differences between what is found in the wild and what is found in our fish tanks, and what we can do to make our fish tanks more like the wild, and the good things that we can do in our fish tanks that can't really happen in the wild. And there are a lot of good things. I think the average, and I keep using this figure, and I don't know that if it's current anymore, but I think that the average lifespan of a fish in the wild is about 2 years. And that's for fish that live much longer than 2 years, that have a lifespan of, 6 to 10 years potentially. That they average, on average, 2 years because so many of them die and get eaten as fry that they never get a chance to get as old as they possibly can. And in our aquarium, it is possible to raise 800 cichlid fry and not lose a single one. And then keep those cichlids alive for 10 years. All of them, all 800 of them, if you had the tank space. So, yes, you're going to lose some, of course, but the point I'm making is that it's possible in our little unnatural glass boxes or plastic boxes that we're calling aquariums or tubs or ponds, that we can cause a highly unnatural rate of survival because we have such close command of what's going on. You know, we could raise those 800 cichlid fry to an inch long and put them all in their own 5-gallon tank. We'd have 800 5-gallon tanks and raise them up to, you know, an inch long in that 5-gallon tank, and then switch all 800 of them to 20-gallon tanks and raise them up to 4 inches in that 20-gallon tank, and then buy 800 100-gallon tanks and raise them all up to 10 inches. But in the wild, that's not going to happen because natural predation is going to knock out about, what, 50, 60% of them. Starvation, disease, natural causes will probably knock out another 20% of them. So only 20 or 30% are going to even have the potential to survive the maximum possible range. Now, those ones that do survive, most aquarists will tell you that fish that survive in the wild are going to be much larger than fish that survive in aquariums are going to be. And that's, once again, the amount of area that it's possible for us to create in a fish tank. Now, if you put 20 guppy fry in Big Rich's pond without any other fish in there, those fish are going to be able to grow about as big as they would in the wild. You know, and guppies are probably a bad example. If you put 500 convict fry in that giant pond. Yeah, Laura, that's I'm trying to create the image of how ridiculous it is, but also how potentially possible it is for us to create an unnatural survival rate by treating our fish the best that they could possibly be treated. I'd love to have 800 100-gallon tanks. I'd have to have automatic water changes because water change would never stop. But just imagine having a fish room with 800 100-gallon tanks in it. And you want to do selective breeding, you drop them in a 100-gallon tank together and net them out when they have fry or eggs and put them in another 100-gallon tank. All right, guys, we're winding our way back up to the hour. Hey, Phil Emerson, welcome to the stream. You've caught me just about to shut it down. Laura says it wouldn't be a fish room, it would be a fish warehouse. 800 100-gallon tanks would probably be several fish warehouses. I don't think you could fit them in most warehouses because 2 100-gallon tanks stacked one on top of the other would be really higher, taller than it would be functional to try to take care of. So you would have maybe 20 in a row, even in a large warehouse. You could get 20 100-gallon fish tanks in a row, and you'd have to have, 40 rows to make 800? That'd be a lot of fish tanks. That'd be thousands and thousands. Aquaball says that he's going to be going live later to show his paludarium. That sounds really interesting, man. So I would suggest that everybody check out Aquaball's paludarium video. And Phil Emerson is saying that I am the bee's knees. Well, I recognize that cat's pajamas, age-related, saying how great I am. I would beg to differ. I'm not great. I'm not a great fish keeper. In some ways, I'm not even a expert fish keeper. I'm a functional hobbyist that's been doing it for a really long time. All right, guys. Haley's going through the, I have 3 empty ready to go planted tanks and it's killing her. Temptations of the live fish store. Your last trip to the live fish store wasn't that great, Haley, so I'm thinking that you probably either need to find a better live fish store to go to, or at least avoid buying rope fish out of that tank, or they let them all escape and get hurt. All right, guys, good luck with your fish. Have a happy rest of the weekend. Go check out Aquaball's paludarium video. And I hope that you found some usefulness to this hour of me rambling on about fish. All right. Catch you guys on the flip side.